Good morning and welcome to the School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Council, affectionately known as SCAAC. I'm Janabeth Francis and I chair the committee, and we would like to welcome everyone this morning. And we're going to start with a roll call of members. I'm going to turn it over to Melissa Chandler.
Good morning, Janabeth. All right. Members, I'm going to call your name. Please make sure your camera is on, state your full name, and then indicate that you are present. Heather Aldridge. Okay. Heather, I don't think I heard you, but that's okay. I see you. And maybe others can hear her, but I can't. So I'll come back to you, Heather. I've got you down. Artavia Acklin.
Artavia Acklin here, present.
Okay. Deborah Atherton. Renee Boss.
Hello, I'm present.
Thank you. Martha Emmons. Chuck Fletcher.
Chuck Fletcher is present.
Okay. Janabeth Francis.
Janabeth Francis, present.
Leslie Jeffries.
Leslie Jeffries, present.
Lisa Keir. Brenda McGowan.
Brenda McGowan here.
Kristen Putnam. Allison Tammy.
Allison Tammy here.
Jenny Uri.
Jennifer Uri, present.
Henry Webb.
Henry Webb, present.
And Jason Reeves.
Jason Reeves, present.
Okay. All right, before I turn it back over to Janabeth to review our agenda and continue our meeting, just a reminder about conducting virtual meetings. The meeting must comply with the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. So the public may view the meeting via the link provided in the public agenda, which can be viewed on the KDE website. SCAAC members must ensure that their video is streaming and they can be seen throughout the duration of the meeting. Committee members, please mute your microphone when you're not talking. However, all discussions must be broadcast to the public. Therefore, be sure that your microphone is not on mute when you do speak. Agenda items requiring a vote will require a roll call vote to record each member's vote. Every time that you speak during the meeting, please unmute your mic, state your name, and take a short pause. That just gives our software time to recognize you. And then please silence or turn off all other electronic devices that may cause disruption to your sound feed. I'll be taking minutes, and those will be shared with the general public on the KDE website when they're available. Okay, Janabeth, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Melissa. Just a reminder, if you would like to download the agenda to the SCAAC committee, you may find that in our folder on the Google Drive that was included in the meeting announcement. So our agenda today includes an approval of our minutes, some accountability and assessment updates, identification and exit criteria for CSI and TSI, Kentucky Reading Academies, and letters training. And then a look at United We Learn, the vision for future education in Kentucky. We will also conclude by actually giving you the updated dates for the next set of SCAAC meetings. So without further ado, in your folder, there were minutes from the July 19th SCAAC council meeting. And so if everyone would have an opportunity to review those, we'll give you a couple minutes right now. And at this time, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes from July 19th.
Madam Chair, Chuck Fletcher, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of July the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. We have a motion by Mr. Fletcher,
I'll second that.
a second by Heather. Okay, to Melissa for the vote. I think we're just going to do a hand vote. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. And you can do it electronically or you can do it in person. Thank you. Any opposition? Okay. At this time, we're going to get to the heart of our meeting, and that is assessment and accountability updates. And I think Rhonda and Jennifer, Rhonda Sims, Associate Commissioner, and Jennifer Stafford, Director of the OAA group, will be on to share some information. I'll turn it over to them.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good to be with you today. Jennifer, I'll pause there and let you weigh in and say good morning. I think you're on mute still. There you go.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the September meeting of the School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Council meeting. I'm so happy that each of you all had the opportunity to be here. We've got a lot of exciting information to share with you about the current events and all of the work that has been going on in the engagement of our educators across Kentucky. So we look forward to the discussion and the information today.
So we're starting really just with a few slides that we used as part of the presentation, the background presentation with SCAAC yesterday. And we do not have everything that was used with SCAAC, but we can certainly answer some questions after we get through these just very brief number of background slides. Part of that was the turnaround time between actually having the standards committee meet, which was last week, and then having the opportunity to discuss with SCAAC and see where they landed on approving the cuts or not moving forward. So again, just purely kind of a timing issue. The SCAAC materials, I think, will go public, if not already on the web. The full PowerPoint with some data information will go public probably within the next day or so, and we certainly can talk about those cuts. So accountability standards setting, and we have for you a kind of a guiding question that we'd like some feedback on in a little bit. And you know, you can read that here. We're really looking for some ideas around communicating around the standard setting process to the public, as well as in general, when we talk a little bit more about data today, some communication. I know there's already been some things come out nationally from the Secretary of Education at the U.S. Department of Ed about how now that we are a bit post-COVID, we know schools and public and personal issues, people are still dealing with COVID, but we are back in school. And so now that we're post-COVID, making sure we have positive, good messages around what our data shows. We've already seen some NAEP long-term trends that were released. We know data is going to not be where we want it to be immediately after COVID, but how can we help people understand that's just the nature of where we are, and how can we put the most positive conversation toward improvement in the future around that? So again, Jennifer, I don't know if you just jump right in here and feel free, we'll just kind of go back and forth. Jennifer and I kind of work together so often, we usually just, once we hit the meeting, go, okay, you do the next one, I'll do the next one, and that sort of thing, because these are things obviously we're very familiar with. So I'll pause, Jennifer, and see if you have any other things you'd like to say about the guiding question we want to come back and discuss with you. And then if you want to, just go right ahead with that next slide.
Sure, thanks, Rhonda. So as part of this transparent process that we have in Kentucky, we brought together a group of stakeholders around the assessment, accountability, actually, standards. Senate Bill 158 called for a significant change to our accountability system. And anytime that you have changes to your accountability system, you need to go and look at those standards and to see if they are still viable, still accurate in the ratings of our schools. With the changes that were brought about by Senate Bill 158, it necessitated the revision of our accountability standards. As you know, the Senate bill, we've talked about several times with this council, that it made changes of status and change. It brought into the accountability system those two components of the accountability system. And status is that current year performance. Status is what we've done in the past, not a lot of change to what we've reported previously in our accountability systems. However, this new component of change will be brought into the system next year when we have 2 years of indicator data. So with the changes and the requirements of Senate Bill 158, this process of revising our standards it was needed. So what we did is we brought together stakeholders from around the Commonwealth to look at both the indicators and the overall performance. So again, those indicators are those measures that are legislatively prescribed. And there was a very specific list of indicators that were written into that statute that include the state assessment results in reading and math, state assessment results in science, social studies, and writing, progress on English language learners, quality school climate and safety, as well as post-secondary and graduation rate. So that exclusive list was written into law, and that's what the standard setting committee really talked about last week when we met with the accountability standard setting group around those particular indicators and what makes performance of very high to very low. So there was rich discussion, there was robust discussion during that standard setting, the correlation between those indicators and those different colors and that overall performance. So the overall performance, again, will be color-based. It is a new system for Kentucky. Previously, we had descriptive words of needs improvement, proficient, or distinguished. Back in 2019, we had the star ratings that lasted for 1 year. And now we have the color rating system that brings together the components of status and then next year change. So for this year, for fall reporting of 2022 is based on that 1 year of data, the 21-22 school year, and that performance of that current year student performance of status. So those were the pieces that were discussed during our standard setting committee meeting last week, and the overall performance. So those recommendations that came out of that standard committee were taken to the local superintendent advisory council that Rhonda mentioned on yesterday. So those cuts then are 1 year cuts and will apply only to fall reporting that we're getting ready to release in October. So these cuts were discussed and will be reported on in October, were those 1 year cuts. Next year, when we bring together the change component, because we'll have at that point 2 years of data that we can look at the change of our schools from the 21-22 school year to the 22-23 school year, that will be the change component. And because, again, that additional component will be added to the system next year, we'll have to do a standard setting similar to the process that we have completed for this year. Rhonda, would you add anything to those explanations?
Sure. I'll just add a couple little additional comments, really. And you did a fine job, Jennifer. One is Jennifer made the comment that this is a process that is needed as you start out something new, that you need, when you're looking at a new test, you set standards on for student performance. When you're looking at new accountability, you have to set some sort of cuts and standards on that. I will tell you that Kentucky, I think, is a bit committed across the years, and I've been around a long time, to have a transparent process. And not every state does that. There are many states where the state agency and the assessment folks run data, they draw cuts, and they take it to the commissioner or whatever the lead person of that state is. Not every state uses the term commissioner. And that is how the decisions are made. So I do think we have always been committed to making the decisions in public and having the discussion in public. And it's much in the same way we're committed to giving districts, usually through your district assessment coordinator, the opportunity to review data before we go public with data. The opportunity to request individual student changes. That happened already back in August. And in a minute, we'll look at a timeline for moving forward. But I do think that it is a best practice to do that. And we certainly did that this year, and I think there is a commitment to that. And when you bring together stakeholders, and you'll see on this slide, Jennifer has some details about the meeting that occurred last week on the 13th and 14th. Again, it was only about status, and it was important that we have a variety of people at the table. Now, we had 2 members of SCAAC that were at the table, and so in a few minutes, they may want to share their reflections on it. But it was important that we have superintendents, that we have principals, that we have teachers, that we had representatives from some of the supportive K groups that are advocates for education. We had parent advocates. We had a student for the first time, and he was excellent. Fully involved in the committee, and I think he was a high school junior, I believe. So it's important, I think, that you bring all those perspectives to the table, and then you also move to the issue after the perspective. After we had the cuts, then they moved forward yesterday for discussion with LSAC. And I'll pause there because I think Ben might need to do a little something there. I think we've got a different presentation or screen being shared. So we'll let Ben make a correction on that.
Sure, give me just a second, I'll fix it.
Sure. I think somebody just probably hit a button. So easy to do.
I see that while Ben is doing that, I see that Artavia has opened her mic, and
great.
we want to say something about the process, Artavia, and then maybe Jana Beth also.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
we
can.
We can.
I was like, oh, I didn't realize my mic was open.
Oh.
No, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve. That was a worthwhile couple of days away from my school campus. To be involved in those hearty, rich discussions as it relates to accountability and what it looks like for us was amazing. To be in a room with everybody that was passionate, very passionate about accountability and doing what's best for kids. I could not have had a better experience. I am so grateful that everybody's voice was heard. That was the big thing. I was afraid that when you get into a committee with 26 educators or 26 people, that all voices wouldn't be heard. And so I was very pleased at the discussion, very pleased that everybody could voice their opinion and defend their opinion, and just nobody take it personally, but we're all about doing what's best for kids and trying to figure out a way to navigate from coming out of COVID and educating kids and getting the best and getting growth. So like I said, this was just a worthwhile experience for my part.
I will echo everything Artavia just said. It was an incredible experience. One thing that I will add is the Center for Assessment led the work, and they've been a partner with KDE through many years of accountability. And the process allowed for individual voice, group discussion, go back and rethink your individual decisions. And ultimately, we came back together and we had a process in place that we could make changes once we saw things. And it was a very packed 2 days. And I felt as if each conversation was honored. And, we had some very challenging conversations. I'm thankful that KDE included 2 members of this council to be on that work, because in years past, we might have been part of the work approving the standards. And so it was great that they let our voice be a part of that. The student was from Heather's district. I'll give a shout out. Very attuned to everything going on. And that we've highlighted the high school student, but there wasn't a single person on the committee who didn't take their job seriously, who didn't commit to really digging into the data and making decisions. And then probably most importantly, being able to voice why they made those decisions.
And Janabeth, I appreciate both your comments here in Artavia. I do think that one thing that's so important about doing a structured process is it was very grounded on actual performance of schools. So you were able to see the profiles, the current data that's not yet been released for schools, but with no identifying information for the school. So you had no idea the school you were looking at, but you were able to see that in sort of the rank order and able to try to make some personal decision on when did you think a school left maybe a orange category to a yellow and a yellow to a green, and then running the impact data. So if that decision stayed, what came out of the conversation, if that decision stayed, what would be the percentage right now based on preliminary data that would fall in those particular categories? Because part of that is just an awareness. You're making decisions, you're looking at it, you're talking about it, you're working through it. But then what is the impact of those decisions? And so I think that becomes just a very informed choice then as people make that movement and ultimately make the recommendations. If you, some of you may have watched LSAC yesterday. There was good, rich discussion at LSAC and a review of the information. The commissioner said very kind of quickly that he wanted to honor what came out of the committee, that we had a process. It was a quality process. It's an industry standard process of setting cuts for an accountability system. And he was very quick to say he wanted to honor those cuts moving forward. Then again, good, rich discussion of that. Jennifer, I'll pause there because you may have some other things you want to add about the actual day
Actually,
itself.
I was going to jump in
Oh,
real
yeah,
fast.
please.
I
Yes,
don't
please,
remember,
Jennifer.
you showed this in LSAC yesterday, but it was over 90% of the committee members felt like that their voices had been heard at a very high rating on a Likert scale. And I think that was the survey we did at the end of 2 very tiring but rewarding days. And so I think that is, again, everybody had an opportunity to have their voices heard. I think one thing that's important that we have to keep remembering, and it goes to the guiding question for this committee, is everything around assessment and accountability is different this time. The indicators are different. How you become novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished is different because of our assessments being different. So it was really good to see the kind of ranking of the schools, but what you knew about your school is probably going to be different moving forward, because it's almost like you have to take all that historical assessment data and this is the reset button.
That's a very good point.
Thanks, Janabeth. That is a good point. And part of the rich discussion, and you can see here the committee members have got the slide. The rich discussion was took place across the days, and there was passionate and sometimes a little heated discussion at times, but it just showed the incredible commitment that our participants and our committee members made to the process and to the commitment that they made to our students and wanting to see our schools do well. And the two areas that I will say that a lot of discussion coalesced was around the academic indicators and their correlation or alignment to the lowest performing and aligning that somewhat closely to the CSI identification, that lowest 5%, so that the red rating by indicators were more closely aligned to that lowest 5%. Also, there was rich discussion around the English learner progress, and that because that's a new indicator for us, and that indicator is different than other indicators because of the English learner progress. It's actually growth of our English learners on that access test. And so really focused discussion on how the students are performing both at elementary, middle, and high schools and how that's different, and that reflection in the system of how those students perform, and with a really honest discussion about being true to seeing those students perform well and caring about the schools that are high achieving, so that it displays that the schools that are high achieving are reflected in that way. So those were two big highlights of the discussions around some of those particular indicators. The statute says that the cuts that are approved for accountability is approved by the local superintendent advisory council as well as the Kentucky Department of Education. And for KDE, that means the commissioner. So yesterday, as we've mentioned multiple times, the recommendation of the indicator cuts as well as the overall cuts that came from the committee were taken to the local superintendent advisory council, and those were approved as they were recommended from the Accountability Standards Committee. So at this point, we can move forward because the commissioner approved the cuts as well. So we can move forward with the timeline for reporting. So this displays the process that we have moved forward with to get to public reporting. And we started back in the fall with some data review from our district assessment coordinators, and provided the opportunity to make individual student changes to data around demographics, 100-day accountability, things of that nature, non-participation. Then we moved into what the standard setting committee did, the September 13th and 14th, and we worked through that process last week and held the special LSAC meeting yesterday on September 19th. And we will move forward with the Quality Control Day on Thursday, September 22nd, with the final opportunity for our district assessment coordinators to review accountability data before it goes public to see if there are any systematic changes or errors that need to be rectified before it goes public. And then we'll move into after the QC day, if there are any errors found in the data, then we will make those corrections and changes and move forward with reporting in October. So that time frame includes the districts receiving all information on October 13th, it going to media on October 14th. And then at that point, our districts can begin working with our local media to develop any stories or getting quotes and trying to communicate what those indicator colors as well as those overall colors really mean, and providing that opportunity for local districts to work with media. October 17th, a press release is scheduled that Dr. Glass can meet with media, and then the school report card is tentatively scheduled to be released and open publicly October 18th.
So
So
Jennifer,
yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. You go ahead. You finished there.
No, so that's just the tentative timeline at this point.
Just a reminder then for those of you watching, the 22nd of September later this week will be the first time the district will see their own information. So they won't see everyone's information, just their own district information. So it'll be the first time they'll see their full assessment data, a number of assessments they've had for a while. They know their ACT performance. They know what their kindergarten scores are. Those are not in accountability, but they've seen those. They'll be able, though, to see the Kentucky summative assessment and alternate assessment information, as well as the color that's been assigned using those cut scores as we've applied those. And again, that day is a focus on looking for big system issues. And so that's why we refer to this data as preliminary, because we could identify something on Thursday that it may be identified by someone else and still might impact your data. So, we do a lot of cautions around this is preliminary. It's a time for you to see things, to help us make sure we've caught any issue that's a programming kind of issue, because we want things to be as clean as possible as they do go public. And yesterday with LSAC, there were data slides shared that showed the cut scores that you would need in the particular indicators. They're not all on the same scale. And you have a theoretical scale for like the lowest score being 0 and the highest being, for instance, with the content areas 125. But then you have more of a effective scale of really where is the highest score, those kind of things. But the scale numbers were shared, as well as impact sort of data. So a lot of the conversation near the end of the standard setting meeting, as well as with LSAC yesterday, was as we look at the overall impact with at elementary, middle, and high school on the overall score, were there too many schools in the center of the distribution? So if you think about a more normative bell curve type of different distribution, what's the percentage that's kind of in the yellow in the center? And again, I think we have to be careful around our messaging, our communication, that's in the average. You're in the center of the scale. I don't think that, we need to help our public understand yellow is not a negative thing. That there's a good percentage of schools that will fall into that yellow category, and that's in the middle of the distribution. So a way to think about it is in an average. And I'll pause there to see if Jennifer wants to weigh in or say anything else related to that. But I did want to mention that too, because there was quite a bit of conversation at the end of the standard setting meeting. And, a proposal was put on the table. It was discussed. Data was looked at by schools, and there were no changes, modifications recommended at that point. And then there were some questions yesterday with superintendents and some discussions. And again, those full data slides will become posted. I just don't know. We don't post those, so I don't know that they're out there yet, but they will become posted in terms of what is the impact based on the preliminary data. So let me pause there, Jennifer, to see if you'd add anything, and then we'll open it up, obviously, for conversation, discussion, questions, all of those good things.
Sure, Rhonda. I can add a couple of comments from the discussion, both at the standard setting meeting and then yesterday at LSAC. And there was there's two different directions that the committee was looking at. They were looking at criterion data and then norm reference data. So when you look at the criteria, it's the criteria on which to set the overall based on the criteria of meeting the different colors and the indicators. So for example, on the indicators, if you had a school, for example, that has all yellow indicators, so if all the yellow indicators, then that's the criteria used then to set that overall. So the discussion at the standard setting meeting is that should a school that has all yellow indicators then be a school that has an overall color rating of green? Or should we have a norm referenced approach to set specific percentages of schools that get each of those different categories and then have like a bell curve? So that was a good bit of discussion at the standard setting meeting. That proposal was looked at to make a more of a distribution, a normative distribution. And when the committee had the opportunity to look at specific school that would have turned then from that yellow to green, the criteria on the indicators did not lead to a green overall as determined by the committee. So that was a good bit of discussion, and the recommendation was then withdrawn to do that. So that cut point between the yellow, which there are good schools, and we know
Absolutely.
that good schools are yellow. And that's what I think that the message is that there are good schools that are yellow, and they're even in red and orange, there's good things happening in those schools. And so I think that's the piece about the communication of those colors, those overall ratings.
Yeah.
And I see somebody, I think.
Yeah, I see some hands. I saw
hands,
Martha. I saw Martha Edmonds' hand come up first, and then I have Henry's hand. So let's
Okay.
go to Martha first. And Martha, if you want to either open your mic or I'm not sure we can see chat, so I think we'll just need you to open your mic.
And Martha, if you are talking, we
You're
don't
on.
hear you.
Yeah, you're on mute if you're talking. Okay, we'll come back then to Martha again. We'll try it one more time because it could be she's had a little technical glitch. Henry, I'm quite sure Superintendent Webb, I saw your hand pop up as well.
Good morning.
Good morning, Henry.
Good to see you all. Thank you all so much for your work and all the members that served on the committee. I know how daunting of a task that has to be, and the law caused all of this work to happen. I've just got 3 quick questions.
Sure.
First, Jennifer, you just shared that schools in yellow we think would be good schools, and red and orange may have good things happening. But we all know the fact is there's schools out there that's got high test scores. The research backs this up. They have low socioeconomic status issues. I would be cautious. I would just caution to say that, you know, you said yellow schools are good schools, red and orange have some good things happening, but I would argue that there's probably some good schools that may even be orange or red that are doing some fantastic things that are not showing up yet. So I would just caution. I guess that's not a question. That's more just a cautionary note in. Let's not judge a book that's doing some pretty crazy things, good things, because they're dealing with some more. I mean, we're sitting here with 65 languages. There's schools out there that don't have but one language. So just to say somebody's orange has some good things happening, I just caution you on that, number one. The second thing I would say is we all know, I appreciate your work, but all we do is put kids on the line and schools on the line, and we do a curve. So my question to you this morning, Rhonda, how does this year's curve, and I appreciate all the work of the committee, I don't mean to belittle that, but how does the results of the curve compare to the star rating curve on like the percentage of schools in each category, because we want to say it's criteria referenced our state assessment. And it is once we set the cut scores, but the cut scores are all normative. So how does it compare to, like, are there 26% top level, 15% middle level? Is that pretty consistent to what we were before, or have we seen drastic changes? So that's my first question. And my last question is, Rhonda, you know, I've had a lot of questions about including the survey in accountability, because context matters. If a district's sitting there with an SRO in every school, but they don't know any different, they don't know that that's a big deal for them to have an SRO, and a school over here doesn't have an SRO, but they get the police to stop by once a week and they rate everything high. But the one sitting over here, I guess my point is that surveys are just so opinionated with context mattering. How did you account for that in the system? Thank you all so much for the work you do.
Thank you. Let me kind of pack those and you keep me honest here, Superintendent Webb, if we forget something, because you got several there in a row. But first of all, let me talk about comparative. We have not looked at the distribution from 19. We did the star rating in 19. The indicators have changed since 19. Now, again, we were taking a test in reading and math, and we were taking a test in the other content areas. So those pieces are a bit more consistent, though the test itself has changed. So we did not go back and look at 19 or any distribution from 19 on the star rating. So that did not feed into any of the committee conversations, any of the detail. That's the kind of sort of analysis we might go back and do at some point, but that wasn't done or used in any particular way. This Senate Bill 158 sets, 6 new indicators in essence, or slightly revised indicators. Graduation rate has been consistent forever, but even post-secondaries had some changes in 158. Now students only have to achieve one measure to be considered successful on post-secondary. And so we did not use any kind of look. That's some data we could look at. We could see what happened with STAR versus what happens with this. But this process looked at the current performance, the profiles of schools, and helping to set that cut, and then looking at what would be the impact. And that's where you see the normative piece of what would be the impact. And then there was that opportunity to discuss and potentially move that. So there was no linking back to 2019. So that's one of the first things. Jennifer, I'll pause, so you feel free to jump in at any point here along the way as well. I don't know if you have anything additional on that.
No, I think you covered it. Okay.
And then the other piece of information was around the survey. One thing to keep in mind, the state board put a weighting on all of these indicators. The survey is weighted at 4%. It does have some distribution across schools. So there are some schools that score higher on the survey data than others. We only include students that completed the survey. So there's no any kind of a zeroing of putting data in. For instance, if you're supposed to test a student with reading and math and you don't test them and they're not exempt, we add in that novice level performance. That is not the case with how the survey is handled. So again, this is the first time around of using a survey for that data quality. That full set of data for every school, including survey performance and the scale, were part of what the standard setting committee looked at. Again,
Rhonda, can I jump in here?
Yeah, please do. Please do,
I think this is really interesting because, Henry, I would tell you, when I started on the survey data, I felt like I was doing it wrong until we had some great conversation about what the survey data really means. And so it's a 4-point Likert scale. And so, agree or strongly agree would have landed a school at 66%. So when you see the cut points when they get released, you will see that the survey data doesn't match what we would see in reading, math, science, social studies, writing. And the committee really took time to think about the impact of the survey data. Because of our current climate in the community around school safety, we were very cautious about what a school that might be given the color red or orange would mean in terms of school safety. So I think you're going to find that the committee was very generous because they really stopped and thought about, you know, a survey is how the kid's feeling that day, maybe even how they're feeling that hour. And we were very cautious about the impact of a red or an orange based on the fact most schools had agreement that their school was a safe place.
And so Jennifer, help me there. Did I miss any of Superintendent Webb's questions, or Superintendent Webb, you feel free to bring that back up too. If we missed anything on that conversation, I appreciate your comments as well. You know, again, we want to help schools message, and I think you brought up a good point, and I would put that under the summary of, you know, those of you leading schools, whether you're at a district level, whether you're in a support role, whether you're a principal, whether you're a teacher, you know your school better than any set of data shows your school. That data is some consistent measures across the state. But I think then it becomes important that you help shape the narrative and the story about your school. And I think you gave us some good suggestions and narrative around that. Because I do think you want to help with conversations with local media and others. I know Jana Beth has been a great proponent of that over the years and her experience as a DAC. I'm sure Heather has done the same. But I think it's important then you think about what is the story for our particular schools and our districts, and what is the demographic, what is the makeup. That information is all going to be in the report card in different parts, but I think you choose to help set the narrative of where you want the focus to be. And so that's where I think you can get that conversation in there. Maybe a school does show up with a color of orange, but here's the positive things that we're doing in this school. Here's what makes this school a good school, and how might we take information that we've learned from the system and make change or make improvement, or here's what we're focusing on in the way of improvement. Maybe you're moving toward more authentic kinds of experiences for students. You know, we're looking at that as a whole state. So I do think you raised some very good points, and things that we will also see how we can help schools with that. But again, I think that becomes a real part of the communication. You know your school's best, and so tell their story in this context.
So I will jump in at this point and just give a real high kind of focus for this committee, because I think Henry led us down this great conversation about what other cautions or concerns do we want to give, going back to our focusing question. Just so you remember, every school in Kentucky should get between 3 or 6 indicators. And then those indicators roll together to give them an overall kind of score, and that overall score is just based on status. And so there's a lot of data to unpack. If you rely strictly on that overall, you're not necessarily looking at each of the indicators, but even within the indicator, there is data to unpack. So for example, the academic indicator has reading and math. The other indicator has science, social studies, and writing. So, you know, there's a big caution flag, and this is my caution to the department, to say that there's a lot of data, and to learn about a school, spend time looking at the school report card, because if you just focus on that single color, then you're going to be limited. So I think what would be a good exercise at this time, kind of based off of what Superintendent Webb did, was what other cautions might we give the department around communicating? He talked about this idea of giving any sense of what kind of school you're talking about based on a color. So kind of avoid attributes based on a particular color. My caution is about just looking at a single point of data that you can unpack everything. What other cautions might the committee want to share?
I would just, since I'm representing the teacher voice here, just say that it would be really useful to have communications with teachers, so that we all understand really clearly because we have a loud voice in our communities, and the way we understand our school can help us not feel attacked, but can also help promote all the positive things happening in our schools. So if there's some way to have some communications directed for teachers to help us communicate well within our communities, that would be great.
Thank you. Thank you, Renee.
Jennifer, you have your hand up.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to just say that as a teacher, I also agree with Renee. And at the beginning of the presentation, when you had talked about the question that you had for us about communicating standards and et cetera, the first thing I had written was focus on growth. And I think, just to add on or, agree with Renee in that as much positivity that we can focus on, the better. And, I don't know if it would be possible for, teachers to be given, advanced information on how to interpret everything so that we can kind of have some time to digest it before it's presented to the community. That would help us be able to communicate better with our local communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's all about those good Jennifers. I'm blessed with many of them, and now I have another one, Jennifer Yuri.
Rhonda, can I jump in real quick?
Sure, sure.
I'm just sitting here listening to the conversation, and one of the things I think that we have to, I know one of the things that I'll do with my staff is to really look at the real, look at our demographics, look at how much we've grown, look at kind of us coming out of COVID, but also capitalizing on knowing our clientele and knowing how hard we run and work every day. Look at the fact that there are many families in our communities. They're fighting to get in here, whether we're red, yellow, orange, blue. There's a reason that families want to come to school here. And I think that's an important part once we start shelling out and rolling out scores to our community. We have to capitalize and realize how we sell ourselves and the great things that are going on within our school campuses. And so I don't know how we do this as a state to kind of roll that out, but that is something that I intend to do with my staff, because I don't want anybody feeling like their last year has been in vain.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
of a color. And we've got, and the big thing for me is look at what you did coming out of a couple of rough years. And so now we just have to capitalize and keep growing. But it's important that we make sure that our teachers don't just don't start beating themselves up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
and
to do that as a state, that would be great. I don't know how we do that with the time crunch. Everything is so bop, bop, bop.
Right.
I would say, Artavia, one thing I would want to say is that I had a similar conversation with Brian Gong with the Center for Assessment about ultimately just relying on state assessment results to label or classify your school is the easiest, most simplistic way to do that. The reality is, to really get a good picture of what is a quality school, you would need a lot more metrics that cannot be collected by student assessment data. So I think a message that might need to go out as soon as possible is think about all the success your school has accomplished over the last 2 years. Also, I would say it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek, and I am sad to report that there was someone in my office who wasn't old enough to remember the Brady Bunch song. But what kept going through my head when we were talking about this was when the Brady Bunch sings the keep on, keep on, keep on. you know, this is the first year of this new accountability data. You know, some people have called it baseline, but it is going to be just only status. And we've got to keep on, keep on, keep on. I wish we were dancing, but you could replace learning in that song, because it's just going to be a mark in time. And the accountability system, when it's up and running, is really emphasizing what Jennifer said early, which is that growth. What are you doing? How far have you come? And so this is just half of a system.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, you know, I like the way you phrased it, or Tavia phrased it in a similar way. The successes, what do you have happening there that, as you said, make parents really want their child to be in that school? You know, that's a sense of belonging. That's a sense of community. That's the support you have for kids. You know, you may have data that's a more frequent kind of data. You know, you may do some sort of classroom projects. I know Shelby is heavily invested in their profile of a learner and what occurs even at the elementary level with that. I know all of you have some effort going on. And, you know, as a state, we're exploring how to get that in place statewide, to have things that we're not just looking at a one-time assessment that's late in the year, but rather having lots of other opportunities for people to be able to display what kids know and are able to do, and how you help them grow and get there. So I think all of those things become really important in explaining what your experience has been like during this very challenging time with COVID, and not letting this data in some way limit that picture of quality that's happened, but use it in the ways that can support you. Many of you may have good formative data where you see how students are growing across formative measures that are done more frequently as well. So that's one to think about that's more of a test base. But there are certainly lots of things that are not test based that give a great story of what's occurring in your school.
And Rhonda, I would add to that as well that lots of initiatives are taking place over the past couple years to increase and recover the impact of the pandemic. So a lot of the ESSER funds have been being used. And so I think a good bit of the story around each of our schools are the good things that are happening and those steps that are taking place in each of our schools.
Yeah.
Chuck, you have your hand raised?
Yes, this is Chuck Fletcher. I just want to mention, I've been listening quite a bit as well, but one thing that I think we need to be concerned, or at least if I could say something to the State Department of Education, is Mr. Webb brought up earlier about the number of languages that are in one district. I think we need to be very cautious of that number, because when I look at and listen to those numbers, that's a lot to be to take in for us when it comes to accountability. Another thing that I've heard, I think is correct. We just got to be positive in what we're doing. I think education, a lot of times we see the negative things in the paper and the negative things that come out, but we do not emphasize the positive things that we need to about what's going on good in our districts, our schools, etc. The third thing is that, as you all know, we all want to make sure that every student in the state of Kentucky succeeds.
That's absolutely right. Chuck, if we were going to church together, you know, I would have my Amen sign up there. That was well done. But I do think, you know, you captured well a lot of that conversation that's occurring. You know, when we talk about the languages, I think that's a reflection of some challenges that a school might uncover. That how do you stay focused? How do you stay positive on the good things that are happening? And ultimately, the best positive is getting every kid to success. And that success may look different for every kid, because that's part about getting to that more authentic experience for students. Yeah, well done. And Janet Beth, can we check and see if Martha had a question or comment? I think maybe we lost her for just a second because I saw her pop back in and be admitted. So Martha, did you have a question or a comment earlier when we maybe lost you from the meeting?
Actually, I lost all the sound. And
Oh,
so
okay.
I would raise my hand.
Okay.
But then it occurred to me that I couldn't hear anything you
Oh,
answered. So I
okay.
just totally left the meeting. I
Sure.
had a lot of trouble getting on this morning. I started at 7:45 and
Okay.
had a little thing that said, "You're here. We'll let the moderator know when the meeting starts." But it never came up. And so I kept checking back and back. And
Sure.
then I started
Sure.
over again. So I did it like 3 different times and was late getting here, and then had only been here 15 minutes, and then I lost the sound. So I didn't know if anyone had sound or, so finally I left and came back and.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Martha. We just wanted to be sure we could see some movement going on.
Sorry about that.
No
Yeah,
problem.
well, thanks for trying, getting back in.
Okay, so I have tried to take notes and grabbed what our conversation was about. So I'm just going to review it. And if anybody has anything else to add, our cautions for KDE, really thinking about, and some of them are suggestions, not cautions, but when we think about communicating, just the caution of being careful that we label based on a color, because the whole picture is much more vast than just a color. I love the idea, and I'm going to do something for my own teaching force, of communicating with teachers so that they have an understanding of the system, so they're able to really communicate. They're on the front lines talking to parents and community members, and so making sure we get that in their hands beforehand. Avoid decision making on a single piece of information. Look for the real data. How can we sell ourselves? And that goes more into what are the positives you can focus on. And then just a note that I think is important to repeat, and that is that we have a growing English learner population, and though that growing population can be a challenge for schools. And so we need to pay attention to that data, but also realize that for schools dealing with multiple languages, that it's an additional challenge that they are learning to overcome and to help those students succeed. And finally, a reminder that the goal in anything we do as educators is that all students in the Commonwealth are successful. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, I will turn it back over to Rhonda and Jennifer to see where we are in their presentation.
I think we're at the conclusion.
Did you have a little something, Jennifer? Is there a slide on blueprint? Did I see a slide on science blueprint?
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, there we go. I think the heart of the presentation we're finished with, as Jennifer says, but I do think we had just a little information to share with you about the science blueprint.
So as the science standards are in revision, also the associated assessment blueprint is going through the revision. So groups of people in the science community, teachers and content area experts, have been brought together around advisory panels and review committees. And so those advisory panels and review committees have looked at the standards and provided updates and revisions to the standards. The same group of members also looked at the blueprint for alignment to those standards. And the question that we have for you is that how are assessment blueprints used to inform curricular decisions as well as instructional planning? So those blueprints have a couple of purposes, and the purpose of the blueprint is to communicate to our teachers and education communities as well as other stakeholders the emphasis within those standards and those big domains that are in the standards, as well as then how to plan for your classroom for teachers so they can see about the percentages that are within those different domains. And so that blueprint is also used then as a framework for our assessment vendors to develop the the assessment, they use it to then bring in teachers and develop those items around those different domains and those different standards, so that when they get to the development of the form, they have the appropriate number of items around those different domains. So Senate Bill or KRS 158-6453 put together this very involved process of review of standards and those aligned blueprints that those are reviewed every 6 years. And the science is the next set of standards and blueprints to move through that legislative process. So we are now at the point that we have moved along this, what we call the monopoly board of process for those science and that aligned blueprint. And we are at the point of the SPARC committee. It's called the Standards and Assessment Process Review Committee. And that is the group that determines if the process of revision that the review of the standards as well as the aligned blueprint met the legislative expectation. So that committee will meet fairly soon to review that process. Now, this whole process of standards review and that aligned blueprint is being facilitated by AIR. That's the Institute for Research, American Institute for Research, and they are providing that format and those steps along the way, and they are looking at that blueprint.
I was going to say, Jennifer, AIR that you mentioned is really kind of our third party person. So you see in that block, the first block going down, it says there needs to be a third party. So there needs to be somebody that's outside the Kentucky Department of Education. We've used national cooperatives to help with this project. And in this case for science, it's AIR.
And before the SPARC committee, we are actually going to the interim joint Committee on Education. And so that actually is the step prior to going to the SPARC committee. So we will be in front of the SPARC or the interim joint this year. So the standards as well as that aligned blueprint is moving through the process. Rhonda, anything else to add to the blueprint?
No, I don't believe so. We just really wanted to give you sort of a heads up, but you've had some conversation around the science, the blueprints moving along with the science standards. And so, again, we just wanted to bring that to you since it was an area that's kind of currently being matriculating through this process. It'll come to the board eventually and back to SCAAC as part of that board discussion.
Okay, well, thank you, Jennifer and Rhonda.
Thank you guys for the good conversation and ideas today. We really appreciate it.
I think at this time, and I think Dr. Courtney is still on, to share a little bit about the identification and exit criteria for CSI and TSI, as well as ATSI.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Matthew Courtney. I am the Policy Advisor in the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support here at KDE. And we are the office that manages the federal side of our state accountability system. At your last SCAAC meeting, Dr. Kelly Foster, our Associate Commissioner, was here and discussed some of the waivers that we had asked for and the status of some of that work as we prepared for the fall. And so I'm here to provide you just a brief update today. I will say we don't have any handouts or one-pagers on this yet because this is still pretty hot off the presses and we're still going through the process internally of getting that information together. But this will all be posted to our Comprehensive Support and Improvement website, I would say within the next week and a half. So we're we're rounding the corner on those one pagers. But I will just provide you a brief overview of where we stand for these indicators this fall. The first thing I want to make really clear is that this is the federal side of our accountability system. And so the discussion that you just had related to colors and those cut scores is a separate conversation from what we're talking about here, which are the federal classifications. And there's three federal classifications: comprehensive support and improvement, targeted support and improvement, and additional targeted support and improvement. Those are all established based off of the overall score that is generated by our accountability system. And so Rhonda and Jennifer have already talked to you about how those various indicators are calculated into a score. And so those overall scores are what are used to establish these federal identifications. So I'm going to start with comprehensive support and improvement. That's our CSI status. And we are going to be identifying comprehensive support and improvement schools this fall based on two criteria. The first is that the school will be identified if it is in the bottom 5% of all schools by level based on that overall score. So that's kind of the standard definition of CSI that you'll see that's straight out of ESSA. And we have not added any additional criteria here in Kentucky. We are using the ESSA criteria direct for that status. We will also be identifying comprehensive support and improvement schools if they have a graduation rate below 80%. So that is a little more rigorous than the federal standard. The federal standard is 65%, but we have very high graduation rates in Kentucky, and so we bumped that up to 80%. And that is a statutory level that has been established for a long time. There's no change to that. So we'll be identifying CSI schools based on those two pieces of criteria this fall. You may remember that there is a third identification procedure for CSI, which is an ATSI school that fails to exit after 3 years. And we were successful in securing a waiver from the Department of Education this fall due to the COVID pandemic. So we will not be identifying any CSI schools for that category because of that waiver, where we were given the ability to just sort of wipe those 2 years out of the 3-year calculation cycle. So that was we're really grateful for that waiver. We think that provides a little more flexibility for schools who have been identified as additional targeted support and improvement prior to the pandemic. While I'm talking about ATSI schools, we will not be identifying new ATSI schools this fall. So that is another successful element of our waiver that we requested due to the pandemic. I will say there might be ATSI schools this fall, but they would be schools who were previously identified and did not exit. So this isn't a clean slate on ATSI. We're just not going to be identifying any new ATSI schools. But if you're an existing ATSI school, you have not exited throughout the pandemic, you will remain in that ATSI status. That was part of our negotiation to be able to not have CSI status for those schools, as we've just sort of added a little time back in on their exit timeline. And then finally, targeted support and improvement. These are our subgroup schools. These are schools who have a subgroup performing at or below the bottom 5% of all schools. So what Rhonda and her team will do is they'll look at all of those subgroups across all the schools. They'll see what is that 5% cut score for all schools for CSI, and then they'll apply that same cut score across all subgroups. And if you have a subgroup that is operating or assessed below that 5% cut score, then your school will be identified for targeted support and improvement. One thing to note on this is we are operating outside of our statutory definition for targeted support and improvement this fall, and that is due to our ongoing negotiations with the U.S. Department of Education. So our statutory definition is that you would have 3 years of data. So that subgroup would be performing at or below the bottom 5% for 3 consecutive years. We don't have 3 consecutive years of data due to our COVID testing waivers. And so what USED has required us to do is go back to our original identification of TSI. So if you think back to when we did it the first time back in 2018, fall of 2018, you'll remember that in that year, we did it based on 1 year of data because we have 1 year of data. And then there would have been 2 years of data, 3 years of data, and 3 years of data forever on out. So we're basically restarting that cycle again. So we'll be identifying this fall based on 1 year of data for targeted support and improvement. Next fall, 2 years of data for targeted support and improvement. The next fall, 3 years of data, and then it will be 3 years of data on out. We'll be back in alignment with that statutory definition. Again, that's part of our negotiations with the U.S. Department of Education. We even did an extra waiver request just for that timeline to try and get a little more time and avoid that identification this fall. And we were unsuccessful at securing that waiver. So this was our compromise. This will be doing 1, 2, and 3 years of data. One thing to keep in mind about that is that we are likely to see an inflated number of targeted support and improvement schools this fall because of that 1 year of data. So when you are only looking back at 1 year of data, the pool of schools who are going to have a subgroup that is of significant size, that has that minimum in count, that also is low performing, it's just going to be higher because it's based on 1 year of data instead of 3. And so we anticipate that that will be an inflated number this fall, and then that number will come back down into what we have historically seen, not next fall, but the next one. So we'll see it kind of step back down as we move back to that 3-year cycle. So that's what we're doing for this fall. Those are all of our successful waivers. Like I said, that information will be posted on our website in the next week and a half. We do anticipate that during the quality control period, our schools will know if they've been identified for a federal classification, but we will not begin servicing those federal classification schools until the school report card goes live on October 18th. So if you're familiar with those processes, you know that there's some 30 and 45-day timelines and some different things that kick into gear once those schools are identified. So that official date of identification is going to be October 18th when school report card goes live to the public. I mean, at that point, those schools will receive a formal notification. They'll be invited to trainings and begin to work directly with KDE staff to facilitate that school improvement process. So with that, that's the update I've got for you today. I'm happy to address any questions or concerns that the group may have.
Any questions for Mr. Courtney? So am I correct? I did have one. If you were an ATSI school, you are probably still an ATIS school unless your data shows you exited, and you have 2 more years to get yourself out of that. Is that correct?
That is correct. So you will remain in the status if you were not able to exit, and you will get 2 years. So basically, we're giving you those COVID years back.
Any other questions for the committee? And I think you said all of this can be found at where on the KDE webpage when it becomes live?
Yeah, it'll be on our Comprehensive Support and Improvement school website. You can just search that right in the top bar and that'll come up. It's also on the school improvement drop-down menu if you're on the home page. And again, if you're working with a school that is identified in one of those 3 categories, they'll receive a formal notification from us around the 18th of October. And all of those details we'll dig deeper into those details with those specific schools at that time.
I don't see any hands raised, so thank you, Mr. Courtney. We appreciate your time. And I loved what he said at the beginning. This is all the federal side of accountability. And so you kind of have to divide the two and say, okay, here's what the federal government requires. That's why sometimes what we want is not always approved. And he talked about the negotiations. So great. Christy Biggerstaff is here to talk to us about the Kentucky Reading Academies and letters.
Good morning, guys. So honored to be with you today. I'm probably a new face to many of you, so I wanted to take just a second to kind of introduce myself and tell you where I come from. I have been this is my 21st year in education, and 20 of those years were spent in Monroe County School District. Monroe County is kind of in the heart of Kentucky on the Tennessee line, if you're familiar with Monroe County. Always loved my school district. I was a teacher, a 4th and 5th grade reading teacher, an assistant principal, a principal, and then for the last 8 years of my career there, I was instructional supervisor. But one common thread that I had throughout my entire year being a teacher in an accountable area, I was a portfolio cluster leader, if any of you all remember those days. And I course, was in the accountable area. I was a BAC and a DAC, and in my instructional supervisor role. So assessment and accountability has been constant in my career. I have changed a little bit, but data and numbers is still part of what I do. I joined KDE July 1st as the Director of Early Literacy. And my purpose and goal is to see the implementation of the Read to Succeed Act, if you're familiar with any of that. It comes with a lot of moving parts and pieces. I'm only going to focus on one of those today and talk to you about the Kentucky Reading Academies for just a few minutes. So my guiding question for my presentation today is, how might we support districts to engage in systemic approach to the Kentucky Reading Academies to close measurable gaps in reading achievement, literacy, and reading scores? So that is our purpose with the Kentucky Reading Academies. But I do want to talk to you about our why for just a second, why we are doing and implementing the Kentucky Reading Academies. And as you can see on the screen, I have got K-Prep proficiency results for the last several years, leading back to 2015. So those results, and of course, I'll just skip to the most obvious one at the very bottom, the 21 proficiency results for our third grade reading. Of course, COVID did have a huge impact on that, but really that's not the whole story. If you look back to 2015, we have been losing the literacy race in Kentucky for quite a while. I don't think any of us can look at those percentages and say we're okay with almost half of our students in Kentucky at the proficient level in third grade. And that's not pointing the finger at anyone. Like, that's not saying that this is a certain group's fault. This is a collective issue. And we know that we have to do something different. None of us are okay with that. We know that data and research says that the significance of proficiency by third grade in reading is they're going to have continued academic success. They are going to be less likely to drop out and to get into trouble and have attendance issues. So we know that that's a huge problem. Over the past 5 years, approximately 118,000 Kentucky students in grade 3 were not proficient readers. So we have to do something to change that. And that's what we're trying to do with the Kentucky Reading Academies, or a part of that Read to Succeed Act, to kind of dig a little bit deeper into the data.
Christy, before you go too far, Deborah had a question, and if you want to kick back to that previous slide.
Sure.
I'm just not seeing the slides, so I just wanted to, I don't know if everybody's seeing it, I'm not seeing the slides.
Can everybody not see the slide?
I can see them.
I think we're seeing the slides. Deborah,
okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Christy.
I'm sorry. So digging a little bit deeper into the data, I wanted to show you kind of some subgroup data there that shows the percent of proficiency for our subgroups. And again, none of us are going to be okay with any of those scores. 70% of our English learners are not reading at proficient levels. 70.3% of our Black students are not reading at proficient levels. So again, this just kind of states our why we are focusing on early literacy, and gives us the purpose and direction for the Kentucky Reading Academies. So let's talk just a little bit about the Kentucky Reading Academies holistically. The purpose is to increase the reading outcomes, as I just said, and we're going to do that with very high quality job embedded professional learning for our teachers. And we're going to teach them we're going to basically teach our teachers how to teach our kids to read. And that's something that nationwide, a big percentage of our universities do not prepare our teachers. I know I can speak from personal experience. I went in as a new teacher to teach 4th and 5th grade reading, and I was not adequately prepared to teach our kids how to read. So I feel like this is a huge step in the right direction for our teachers. This is a very high quality professional learning that we're going to give them. It's over a span of 2 years. So it's not a set and get. It's not a one and done. Of course, anything that is as critical as teaching kids to read is going to take some time and some effort. So the Reading Academies, the first phase started in August, and we are going to have 3 phases of these academies. The second phase will start next school year in 2023, and of course, the third phase the following school year. We have focused on getting our K-5 teachers and administrators in this first phase, and we'll open it up to everyone during the second phase of the work. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. But what makes these unique is it removes those financial barriers. This is a free professional learning, and it is a costly professional learning that we are offering. But the Read to Succeed Act funds this, along with some ESSER funds that KDE set aside for this work. And it is a really intentional, strong professional learning. It invests in people and not programs. So this professional learning is not a program. This is working with our teachers, and we all know that our teachers are the most important critical aspect in our classrooms. So this is not some type of program that they're going to implement or do any changes to their curriculum. It's evidence-based, it's comprehensive. You can incorporate this learning. It basically is giving our teachers a skill set and a tool set in order to teach our kids how to read. So you can align this learning, this skill set and tool set with any curriculum that you have, any program that you already have included in their school. And as I said, it's a 2-year professional learning. So there's 4 units per year, 8 units total. And at the end of each unit, and it's very much like, I kind of would say that it's very much like a master's level course that they're taking. So this master level course is on a platform that teachers see videos, they work through content, they answer questions, and then at the end of each unit, there is a national presenter that meets with them live in a virtual setting and kind of goes over the learning. There's case studies embedded in this learning. So it's very much a rich learning experience for our teachers. And Chuck, I see your hand is raised. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Very good. I like what you're saying here, but there are a lot of volunteers that comes into schools to work with students that are a low level for his reading. Is there any part where the teachers can take their training, administrators, etc., take their training to train the volunteers how to help students to read better?
I think that's a great point, Chuck. When I was a reading teacher, we really depended upon our volunteers to, lead small groups, and our instructional assistants are a huge part of our learning too. And absolutely, I think once teachers get through the curriculum, the 2-year curriculum that they're going to be learning with our professional learning, I think they can quickly adapt and teach, pass on their knowledge to our assistants and our instructional volunteers within the school, because that's important to keep in mind too, that we have this huge team of support. If we're lucky to have that huge team of support, I should say, then absolutely, this is very transferable information. All right. And then, so I've talked all about it, but I've not said what it is. Letters, language essential for teachers of reading and spelling. That is the professional learning that we are incorporating into the Kentucky Reading Academies. It basically helps us to determine what to teach. It gives us the why some of our students struggle, and then gives them strategies to help address those struggles. And then it helps our teachers to know and understand the how our students learn to read. And that has been a missing piece for a long time. And if our teachers know how students learn to read and to write, then they're going to understand what to do and incorporate in their classroom to fix some of those deficiencies. So why are we so excited? And it's a very exciting. Kentucky's never done anything like this before. There have been some states across the nation that has implemented this professional learning. I know this year, last year, this year, and coming up next year, there are a ton of states that's jumping on board. So it's very exciting that we are offering this very, like I said, a rich and deep professional learning that spanned across 2 years. To our teachers, and we want every single teacher to be a part of it. That is my goal. People are hesitant because it's not easy, and people know that it's not easy. It requires time and dedication, and we know that our teachers are already stretched thin, but it's actually closer to 1,900 teachers and administrators in this first phase, which is so exciting to me because they saw the need. They know that their kids are struggling and what they have done is not working. So they jumped on board and volunteered their time. Something that's kind of unique with this Letters Professional Learning is that we offer the live unit sessions. We offer those during the day, but we know that substitutes is a struggle in a lot of different districts. So we've offered evening unit live virtual sessions along with Saturday. And you would be amazed at the amount of educators that are doing the evening and Saturday sessions with our letters training. We will, as I said earlier, open up registration for phase 2 sometime this year. We're kind of debating on when to do that because sometimes the earlier you open up, life circumstances change, and we know that. So more than likely will be toward the end of this school year. We'll open up the next phase in the registration process. And something exciting too to note, the impact is already being felt in Kentucky, not with this, we've just started, but I know we've had several school districts, Hancock County in particular, reached out to us that implemented the Letters Professional Learning last school year. And Robin Pointer, the assistant superintendent there, reached out from Hancock County and said, you know, this is so exciting. Kentucky is offering this. We have already seen the positive impact that this professional learning is doing in our classrooms. You know, let us be your cheerleaders. Let us help. You know, we want to help you spread the word. So that's so exciting to hear that the impact of this professional learning is already being felt in Kentucky. And we know, as I said earlier too, there's been successful implementation in other states. For example, Mississippi implemented letters several years ago and has seen the effects of that, and their literacy and assessment scores are climbing continuously each year. So it's exciting to know that this has been successful. And I know with the wonderful educators that we have in the state of Kentucky, this will be successful here too, because they want it to be. And we've seen that already with our phase 1 cohort. So I will end there and just say or ask, do any of you all have any questions or comments about the Kentucky Reading Academies or letters?
Martha, go ahead. And Martha, you're on mute. We're still seeing you muted.
There we go.
Is there any thought to integrate this with the college teacher training programs so that teachers don't have to wait until they've already had 4 or 5 years of school before they start learning how to do this?
That is an absolutely wonderful thought, Martha. Yes, that is part of the Ready to Succeed Act. In part, I mean, it's not but our university partners are a part of that entire bill. I want to say, I'm so excited to say that we have several professors from across the state that are in this phase 1 cohort. The universities were able to join in and pay a fee, but they were able to join in with us. And we have several representatives from a lot of the colleges in Kentucky already that say, you know, I want to learn. I've heard about letters. I've heard about what you're doing. I want to be a part of this because I want to teach my pre-service teachers. And we really hopefully have the intention of having a group or a cohort of pre-service teachers to join us in later phases to kind of, gather their input and feedback of what their learning was. So that's absolutely a part of that, and a big blessing to have all of these university partners along with phase one. And I feel like there will be more in phase two.
And right now, are all the teachers who signed up volunteers, and was every teacher in the state who teaches elementary reading given the opportunity to sign up? And
Yes.
do they have to pay anything to take this class at this time?
No, it is completely free. KDE is fitting the bill, and that is, of course, along with the Senate Bill 9, the Read to Succeed Act. So, no, it was completely free, and we tried our best to get the word out and through emails, and we had some webinars and whatnot. But yes, every K through teacher and administrator were allowed the opportunity to sign up for this.
Good.
Jason, you had your hand up. I don't know if you had the same question as Martha.
I did have the same question, so thank you for answering both her and our questions.
They're an important piece of this puzzle too. Absolutely.
Brenda?
Thank you, ma'am. To extend Martha's question, what percentage of our teachers partook of the opportunity in phase one?
Well, I couldn't really tell you the percentage, to be honest with you. I've broken down the data as far as the amount of participants per district. Like I've got a district list, and we have a really good spread. We don't have participation from every single school district in Kentucky, but we're very close. I would guess to say that there was probably only a small handful of districts that do not have representation there.
So I want to jump in from the district perspective, Brenda, and we have almost 2 elementary teachers in every building participating. We have someone in every building participating, but we are not alone in the fact that we offered professional learning stipends to our teachers to do this. And so it was great because I see it as a real collaboration with the Department of Education. They paid for the course, and now we are able to offer professional learning stipends. And then my reading specialist that works primarily with K-3 teachers is going to offer office hours, trying to build the consistency. So it is a great opportunity. And Christy, I'm thrilled to hear that we have almost somebody from every district participating.
Thank you.
Too. And it is my goal to reach out, and we feel like once our teachers get into the learning and start seeing some measurable results, I feel like that word of mouth will get out. So the districts that didn't take advantage of this opportunity in phase one, we hope to join us in phase two. Any other questions or comments for me? Again, such an honor to be with you all today. Thank you for all the work that you do, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you, Christy. And I would say if any of you are in a particular district and want to know if you have any participants, Christy could share that personally so that you can get some more information and kind of see the learning happen as it's going along. So at this time, we're going to move along in our agenda. And we have United We Learn, Kentuckians' Vision for the Future. I believe we have David Cook and Sarah Snipes here to share with us today.
Hello, and I will just confirm, I believe David was unavailable to be with us this morning, unfortunately, but I just want to leave just a moment to see if he is indeed with us. Right. Well, hello and good morning. And I'm just so excited to continue, I think, what was a great conversation earlier around accountability and assessment. And I kind of threw in the chat that we would kind of continue that conversation here in this portion of your meeting regarding the work that some of our communities are doing to lift up other measures of what they value in those communities. So really excited to continue that conversation and just grateful to be on with you all this morning. So we'll just touch base and revisit. I believe I've spoken with you all before about our local laboratories of learning. And as this work has evolved and grown into United We Learn as a vision for the future of education here in Kentucky, we're so excited to see so many initiatives and the work that is happening in communities across our state really bring this vision to life. So just excited to share where we are in this work and hope to engage with you all during my portion of today's meeting and kind of have you dive in to experience a little bit of what the Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education went through as they listened to members of communities across our state and what our L3s have been doing as well to advance that work. I will pause here just for a moment. I've gotten feedback before that my speakers on this new computer might be a little iffy, and so just want to make sure. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, great. So just some guiding questions for our time together. We'll talk about what work is being done to realize this vision, Kentucky's United We Learn vision, how the newly awarded federal competitive grant for state assessment will support this vision, how our local laboratories of learning, or L3 communities, are supporting the emergence of local models of assessment and accountability, and finally wrap up with a conversation amongst you all of why is it important that our local communities start to co-create accountability systems. So just wanted to give a kind of a high-level view. Many of you may be familiar with initiatives that are happening in different districts across our state. And we've been having a lot of conversations about just how connected this work is. Being lifted up, especially in our L3s, is what our communities feel that we need to support this vision for our future of education. So just wanted to take a moment to lift up a few of these projects that communities are engaged in. Of course, KDE as an agency has been really digging into strategic planning, thinking about how we address and plan ahead for the agency that aligns with this vision as well. So we're looking at habits of empathy, co-creation, inclusion, and reciprocity in our strategic planning, and just want to spotlight Karen Dodd and Melody Cooper in the work that they've done to really bring that to life within the agency. Of course, we have a Portrait of a Learner subcommittee as part of the State Board of Education as well, and that we see as a key role as well in supporting this vision. The Deeper Learning Grant that our 8 educational cooperatives have rolled out into their regions supports this vision as well. And if you've heard, we are launching the Kentucky United We Learn Council, which I'll talk more about here in just a second. Our local laboratories of learning continue their journeys to co-create local models of assessment and accountability with their communities. And we also have launched a project with PBL Works to scale gold standard project-based learning to 1/3 of Kentucky schools. We are launching tonight, actually, with our educators. 7 communities, 7 districts have agreed to pilot an exciting math badging and Algebra 1 micro-credential program in partnership with the XQ Institute and the Kentucky Center for Mathematics. And then we also have our Kentucky Innovative Learning Network, a group of about 42 districts who have been leading a lot of this work for years now and thinking about a new innovative teacher pilot. We've heard from those districts that it's great to be in an audience with district leaders, but how do we connect more in supporting innovative teachers in the work that they wish to do closest to students in their classrooms? So this is not an all-inclusive list by any means, but just some of the current projects and initiatives that if you talk to several of our districts, they'll tell you they're involved in some of these. And we see them as a great support for creating more vibrant learning experiences for students, encouraging innovation and assessment, and of course, collaborating with our communities. So I will just pause here in talking about this federal CGSA grant. We are so excited to be one of 10 states that were awarded this federal grant to advance this vision, the United We Learn vision, and specifically work with communities to really dive into a competency-based education system for the state of Kentucky. And I will frame this by saying that David Cook has been a huge support within our agency to not only help us apply for this grant, but also to manage some of the fun logistical pieces that go with receiving a federal grant. So if I am not able to answer any questions today regarding this grant, I will make sure that you have his contact information so that we can follow up with you and make sure that your questions are answered. But just to give kind of an overview of what we've been given from the federal Department of Education, we applied back in May of 2022, and we were just awarded back in August, at the end of August, $3 million that will cover and support us over the next 4 years. And there were two priorities for this grant. We chose to apply for priority number 2, which it stated that projects supported under this grant must advance the state's ability to evaluate student academic achievement using comprehensive academic assessment instruments that emphasize mastery of standards and align competencies in a competency-based model. And we already saw implications and trends of this in many of our L3 communities who had trends for a desire to advance competency-based systems. The grant award provides us with resources to support those 3 big ideas that I mentioned from United We Learn. And I always emphasize when we talk about United We Learn, as Dr. Glass will always say, this is truly a Kentuckian's vision. When we conducted the listening tours in the spring of 2021, shortly after Commissioner Glass joined the agency, we went out and listened to over 1,000 voices, took data from those conversations, and came up with themes for the future of education. And so that's where these 3 big ideas come from: designing more vibrant learning experiences for all students, scaling innovation in our schools, especially in assessment and accountability, and creating bold new future through collaboration with communities. And so with this grant, we are so excited to launch the Kentucky United We Learn Council November 29th and 30th, who will continue the work over the next 4 years with a few strategic goals and strategies. I do have access to a 1-page document that I can share out to give you a more comprehensive view of what those goals and strategies are. But we're excited to kind of continue the work of the Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education. Some of you may have been involved in that work or heard about it. Really bringing in an inclusive group of stakeholders that will have standing committees. So we'll have 3 standing committees, 1 for each of those big ideas from the United We Learn vision. So I will give you some information. If you're interested in engaging in this work as a member of the council, I would imagine that scaling innovation in schools, particularly in assessment accountability, may be of interest to this group. And so that's an opportunity that you would have to engage on a subcommittee that will specifically be diving into scaling and implications for assessment and accountability models. So we're really going to work together to lift up those local inclusive co-creation of high quality innovations and create paths toward a new federally approved competency-based education assessment and accountability system for our state. That will include developing a roadmap for design and implementation. We're also hoping to develop recommendations for the reorganization of KDE to more effectively oversee the implementation of such a system. And of course, the subcommittees as well will develop state policy recommendations and legislative priorities for 2024 and 2026 to advance competency-based education implementation. So again, just a high level, some of the goals and strategies. Again, I have a document that could give you a few additional details and then put you in contact with David Cook, our director in the Division of Innovative Learning, or just certainly answer any questions that we can at this time. So I'll pause there just to see if anyone has questions about some of those goals and the purpose of the work behind our grant. We have a wealth of support pouring in to really bring United We Learn and Kentuckians' visions to life. Of course, we continue our partnership with the Center for Innovation and Education. Supporting us with policy is KnowledgeWorks, University of Kentucky's Center for Next Generation Leadership, the Center for Assessment, PBL Works, the National Center for Families Learning, the Human Research Resources Organization, Lions Assessment Consulting, the U.S. Department of Education, as well as the Kentucky Student Voice Team, the L3s, and our Kentucky Association of Educational Cooperatives are just some of the key areas and folks who are supporting us with this grant implementation. So a big piece of the Kentucky United We Learn Council will be to learn from communities who are developing alongside with their stakeholders in the development and design of new accountability and assessment models. And so we're excited to update you today, as I've told you a little bit about our L3 communities before, but we are in a place with our cohort 1 teams. We have 18 overall. 7 of those districts are in cohort 1. They launched in the fall of 2021. So they've been well on their way to working with their communities, designing with those folks at the table some new approaches to assessment and accountability. And they really grounded that work in first developing a student experience, a new student experience that they wanted to bring to life in their districts. So Ben, I may tap on you to help me make sure that this video runs smoothly today, but this video is going to show you an overview of the 7 communities and what they've developed to date. And they are currently testing and refining these prototypes so that they can really think about the data and what they're learning about this student experience that they've designed. So as you watch this video, I'm just going to encourage you to think about the questions on the right-hand side of your screen. How are these prototypes creating more vibrant learning experiences for students? What innovative approaches to assessment are emerging in these prototypes? And where do you see opportunities for increased community collaboration? So after we watch the video, I'll just kind of open up the floor for a moment and we can reflect on anything you noticed from these 3 questions.
The Kentucky Department of Education, under the leadership of Commissioner
Is that working okay for everybody? Great.
Glass, brought together voices from across Kentucky to lay out a vision for the future, which became the United We Learn report. In the words of Commissioner Glass, this is what Kentuckians told us they wanted when we took the time to listen to them. Kentuckians are asking for vibrant learning experiences for every student, innovation in our schools, working in partnership and collaboration with communities. Next, United We Learn launched the local Laboratories of Learning, or L3s. These L3s committed to working with 4 habits in mind: inclusion of diverse voices, empathy to understand the experience of people in the system, co-creation to build solutions together, and reciprocity through responsiveness and shared ownership. L3 communities created inclusive coalitions. They reviewed the United We Learn report, interviewed members of their communities, and identified a problem their community wanted to address. They worked with their community to design experiences that would address their local challenge. Here are the prototypes of the first cohort of L3 communities. Logan County is seeking to enhance the learning experience of every student with the creation of a dashboard to display and report the whole of a student's learning experiences. This dashboard will provide the learner and their family with a better set of tools to demonstrate readiness, including students' successful attainment of profile competencies, academic success, participation in work-based learning, and extracurricular activities. The community of Allen County is designing student learning experiences to align with their Patriot Profile competencies, things like resilient learners, creative problem solvers, engaged global citizens, effective communicators, and accountable collaborators. Allen County is building a portfolio defense system for students to present evidence of their work to parents, community members, and experts. These defenses will give the Allen County community important information about how schools prepare students to be successful lifelong learners. Johnson County wanted a new way to share individual student growth and make learning more connected to real life. They prototyped a digital leadership portfolio that captures learning as students explore possible career paths. Students will have ownership of their academic growth, learn about different careers, apply for different opportunities, and obtain career-specific skills. Students will present their learning publicly and in their digital portfolio, which will also be used towards graduation and industry certifications. Fleming County has been working toward building a community-facing dashboard to report on important parts of their school's work, things like learning, culture, leadership, and operations. This dashboard is called Measures of Quality and is intended to serve as an engine for meaningful change in the district, not just a report card for the schools. This is a year-round process, and the dashboard is updated each month based on many sources of data and input. Frankfurt is using the foundation of their district profile of a graduate work to continue the development of an engaging competency-based learning experience at the middle and elementary levels. In addition to the current high school defense structure of 6 skills, personal responsibility, collaboration, creativity, communication, citizenship, critical thinking, Frankfurt is creating more personalized, passionate pathways for learners by incorporating student presentations of project-based learning and competencies in 5th grade. Shelby County is striving to build a strong partnership between the community and schools through the use of the Shelby County Profile of a Graduate. The team has created a communication plan that will engage all stakeholders, from students to employers to government leaders, in the understanding of the value of the competencies of the profile of a graduate in the community, workplace, and post-secondary education. Jefferson County, upon hearing from parents, students, and community leaders, recognized a need to nurture a broader set of student academic talents and life skills to show mastery of learning in personalized, flexible ways across grade levels. Their approach is to build on the groundbreaking Backpack of Success skills to cultivate relevant and authentic educational experiences and credential student learning inside and outside the classroom to help students demonstrate competence to the world beyond school. While there is more work to do, some early learnings from this important work include: transparency is more than publishing measures in an accessible space. To create real trust, communities have to understand the measures and feel that they reflect their values and needs. Communities are finding that by working with families, students, and community members to design new assessment and accountability solutions, they are generating ideas that more people understand and feel good about. They are working as community teams to build this foundation to meaningful accountability at the local level. Thank you to all the L3 communities for their work to advance education in Kentucky.
So as you were watching that, and I realized there's a lot of great work happening, as I mentioned, not just in these 7 communities, but in 18 across the state, in 2 additional cohorts. What's coming to mind for you in terms of more vibrant learning experiences? Where do you see evidence of those possibilities here in these designs? Jennifer.
Well, this is great. I was wondering, could you possibly tell me more about Frankfurt Independent's personalized, passion-driven pathways, please?
Yeah, and so I'll preference, Jennifer, a lot of these are still very much prototypes in the way that they're being tested right now in these schools and communities, and then being revisited and redesigned. So currently the plan in Frankfurt, and now considering also leadership transition. So we're also in a place where we're onboarding that community and their new leadership. Really are looking at taking what exists in primarily in 11th and 12th grade space and starting to think about how to scale across the K-12 system, looking at 5th grade in particular. And so how can we start to introduce those students to competency work and then tie that into areas of interest for them. So really capturing areas of interest, also tapping into opportunities for projects within classrooms. So in their 5th grade ELA classroom, for example, starting to work on community partnership projects. So not only learning about something within a required reading resource, but then taking that and helping support students as they develop a community action-based project that they can take from there and really leverage their own strengths and interests. And while, of course, lifting up competencies that they're learning and skills to support that work as well. Anything, I'll broaden that up a little bit as well. I mean, so any examples that really resonated with you of how these communities are creating more vibrant learning experiences for their students? What innovations are you hearing about how they're approaching assessment and accountability? And where do you see that they're increasing the way, the opportunities they have to to collaborate with their communities?
I think all of these have involved community at a great level. So I think we are seeing just even bringing the families into the conversations. I think can't remember if it was Allen County or Logan County talking about dashboards, similar conversations, all about how to make authentic family partners. So I think that's a great start.
Thank you. Yes. And I think it is worth noting, I think it mentions here in this video, but these prototypes that you just learned about, a little about, were not created by the district. It truly was an inclusive co-creation. We walked students, families, business leaders, local politicians through a design thinking process. And this is what they've developed in those communities. So truly inclusive teams across the community who came together to come up with these solutions. So it's very exciting to see just a wealth of knowledge from different aspects, different parts of communities coming together to bring these ideas to life. So how this kind of bridges to the Kentucky council that we are launching, United We Learn Council, is really to give the L3s a space when that group first convenes in November to really elevate this work and have them think about the implications for policy and how we can scale and spread some of these ideas across communities in Kentucky and what that might mean for a future statewide system of assessment and accountability. And so that's just a little bit of the work that they'll be doing based on the council as a whole, but also those subcommittees and their charges as well.
The Kentucky
So I did want to just kind of give us a chance to engage a little bit with some of the processes that went into the background behind the United We Learn vision. We got there by listening to stakeholders across the state. And I wanted to give you an opportunity, if you were not involved in that work, just a chance to experience what these teams did. We did this with a statewide coalition of about 60 individuals from across the state, but then our L3 communities also went through this process as well. They took their local community. They were equipped with the process of empathy interviewing. So we asked them to go out into their communities and really ask questions about folks' experience. Tell us your story. Tell us how you felt. This was less about getting suggestions and recommendations and more just about listening to their experience and gathering that information as qualitative data. And so what I've done for you here is just to give you an example of two individuals. And these are just a made up scenario and demographics here, but just in consideration of what our teams have done to date to inform our journey. And so we took that information from any empathy interviews that were conducted, and we asked teams to really pull out quotes that resonated, that felt powerful, that really informed where we should go from here. And so on the next few slides, what you'll see is a few key quotes that would have come from an interview with Enrique. And then I want you to think about, I'll prompt you to kind of dive into what are his needs, right? These teams had to really think about, here's what Enrique told us about his experience. What are some compelling needs he has as a user of our state system, of our education system? So we'll kind of walk through that exercise together. Now, in a great, perfect world where technology is on my side, which based on the video it was today, I actually have two examples here. So group 1 and a group 2. If you have access to another screen, or if you have access to the slide deck up, and can move ahead to where it says group 2, her name is Mira. I am flexible and okay with you kind of choosing an individual to analyze here today. So if Enrique resonates with you, work through kind of his considerations. And if you see Mira a few slides beyond this and want to explore her situation, feel free to do that as well. But I'll walk you through these slides just in case you don't have access. So here you can see a little bit about Enrique. Again, not a true member of Kentucky's population, but we want to just kind of show you a little bit of what our teams have experienced here. So Enrique's from a rural town, about 12,000 individuals. He is from a community where the Hispanic and Latin community is the largest ethnic group, followed by white and multiracial. There are approximately 30% of his population, the population in this town, are undocumented individuals, and many work on farms. Main languages are Spanish and English. A median family income of $30,000, and approximately 15% of residents in this community have unstable housing. In this community, there are learning hubs, there are field sites, including one small school district. There is a community college and university present in this community. They have a Boys and Girls Club, a library that offers workshops, and there are lots of farms and several small local businesses. And so you can see here, migrant families are very prominent in this community. They have fears of deportation. Residents in this community are very close-knit. Families and community members report that is part of their culture. Stores are spread out and public transportation is pretty limited. So just knowing a little bit of the context of the community that Enrique lives in. I went out and I interviewed him and asked him about his experience in schools. Now, Enrique is a learner, he's a student. And so the quotes that you see here from him just offer up a little snapshot of his experience. So what I did was I interviewed him and I captured, here are some really prominent takeaways that I had in his interview. He said most of his teachers won't even say his name right or give him a nickname. I don't say anything because my dad says never cause trouble. Enrique also said that sometimes I just wish I had a choice. I'm in high school and each year we read a classic. I can never relate to these stories. There are no people like me in these stories. I read and I do my work, but I wish many times I could suggest books we spend 6 weeks on, books with boys like me. Enrique also said that one time I remember when my school would offer high-level math classes. They wanted a math class to be focused on standardized testing, and I really wanted math to be about application to the real world. I asked why we weren't doing more projects and things beyond test prep, but at the time I didn't think I could do a lot to change things, so I ended up just doing the work. And finally, Enrique said that we take surveys all the time. They ask how we feel about our teachers, and are they working with us? Do they feel like we're learning, and do we have people we can go to? I feel like nothing really changes after those surveys. So again, not a full interview with Enrique, but just some samples of quotes that really felt important that he lifted up there. So I just want you to kind of have an informal discussion feel free to come off mute and talk amongst each other. But what do you feel from Enrique's quotes and what he said? What does he need from our education system? And this can be specific to assessment and accountability, or it can be a little more broader than that.
I think he needs to be heard.
Artavia, Ackland, Shelby County. I think Enrique needs for somebody to truly build a relationship with him and to see him for who he is and to tap into his different modalities of learning. I think we feel like as educators, if we are transcribing, languages and things of that nature, that's enough. And it's not. It's obvious that this baby has been here and he does not feel seen or heard. And he's not going to say anything just because, that we don't cause trouble. But he's not causing trouble in the fact that he doesn't feel comfortable to advocate for himself. That's an issue. I think when we look at the profile, we're trying to teach student agency and getting kids to advocate for themselves. And it's obvious that he wants to, but he doesn't feel the comfort level to do so. Yeah, this one bothers me, and I know it's many like this. Wow.
Thank you, Artavia. Anyone else? And feel free to use the chat. I suppose that would be okay, but welcome the conversation. What does Enrique need?
So Sarah, I think you're modeling a great process. Martha, you were going to jump right in there and talk about what Enrique needs.
As a reader and as a person for whom reading opened so many doors, I really empathize with his remark that the books that he's been given to read or to study in no way relate to his experiences. And I think we do, in so many of our classics, come from a background of European literature that I know that, as a business owner, and we employ high school kids, and when I have a kid working for me whose favorite thing to do is go bow fishing, it's really hard for him to love Great Expectations. And unless we teach kids to learn to love reading at a level that they identify with, we can't move them in to great literature. You can't start with great literature. You have to start with learning to love to read. And I felt that that was something really pertinent that he said.
Deborah.
Here, I think off of what Octavia said, he needs to trust that what he has to say is going to be heard and something's going to happen from it, because it sounded like he was a little lost faith in the fact that his opinion mattered. So he needs to believe that his opinion does matter.
Thank you. Jennifer?
I just wanted to add on to what Martha had said, and it kind of ties in with my question about Frankfurt's program with the personalized, passion-driven pathways. And I just want to kind of add on to what Martha said about how I think it's so important that we offer students the ability to, choose, to make choices, and to be able to, student-driven learning is so important. And I would like for us to be able to offer more opportunities for them, like for Enrique to, read a book or whatever that was more interesting to him. And I think that's something that as a whole, we could work on, and in turn would probably help, reach higher achievement levels.
Thank you. And so what you're kind of experiencing right now is obviously an abbreviated version of what we've asked our L3 teams to do. They went out, they conducted those interviews, they brought back to the group what these interviews told them, right? This is data that Enrique's given us. And they had this conversation in their team, right? Artavia is sitting next to a local business owner, sitting next to a local politician, sitting next to a district leader, and they're having this conversation. What does Enrique need? He's not here at this table, but we have an obligation to bring his voice into our design. And so I think that the empathy interview process that we're asking communities to engage in has been really, really powerful and has informed systems well beyond just assessment and accountability, because Enrique, as you've seen, he does not want to cause trouble. And so he may not insert himself in that in those conversations or in those spaces if they don't exist in structures in his district. And so just lifting up for you kind of that experience for them. And then, of course, we've charged these communities by tackling assessment and accountability specifically. So local business owner, think about what does this mean for what we need in terms of assessment? And how are we holding ourselves accountable as a community to Enrique? So I just want to offer that question up here as well, based on what we've talked about, or it might be some compelling needs for this student. What are the implications? And I think we've spoken a little bit about Shelby County's, for example, the profile of a graduate and some of the addressing skills and in addition to traditional academic measures. But what are some insights that are coming to mind for you about how we might, what kind of system Enrique might thrive in?
I'm gonna speak because nobody's talking. When I think about Enrique, I think he would thrive in a system that allows him to branch off and show his learning in different ways. I think about him in performance assessments. I think about him in applying his learning through the use of the profile. Him being able to communicate and collaborate with other students. It would be amazing. I think that once he was immersed in an environment of that nature, I think he would begin to thrive, because once he starts collaborating with other students and they're working through problems and they're communicating about what they're doing and they're learning, he's going to start gravitating some of the characteristics that lead to student agency. And he's going to start advocating for himself a little bit more. And he's going to feel like he matters in his educational process. And that's the thing right now. He doesn't matter in his eyes. He's just here. He's going to school. He's not experiencing school. And he deserves to experience school.
Brenda?
Learn to say his name. His name is uniquely him. How can he feel like he belongs to the community if people can't say Enrique?
Absolutely, Brenda. Thank you. Any last thoughts there about Enrique, his experience, his needs, what we might shift or consider in assessment and accountability because of his voice? Well, I did say that Enrique was not a real Kentuckian, and that's not entirely accurate. Actually, Enrique is a user profile that the Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education created. And what I mean by that is Enrique is a combination of multiple real Kentucky students. So when we collected a wealth of interview data from students across Kentucky, Enrique's profile is actually a combination of multiple students. And so while he himself as an individual is not real, those are true and actual quotes from Kentucky students. Every single one of those came from an empathy interview that was conducted across the state of Kentucky. So just powerful, I think, to reflect on. These are truly what Kentucky students are saying when asked about their experience. And it's our responsibility. And as a council, I'm so excited that you all are diving into this and helping just to think of ways you might support communities who are going out and gathering the same information and thinking about with their community how to move forward now that they know these things. I will, if we have time and if there's an interest, I would love for us just to think about, I'm sorry, let me backtrack just a little bit. So what the coalition did and what our L3s have done is after they have that conversation, they really looked ahead. What is that desired future for Enrique? What would he tell us that he envisions for a future where he is seen and recognized? And the coalition lifted up that he would envision a future where students demonstrate their learning in different ways, something I've heard from this group already, that capitalizes on every student's individual strengths, helps them own their learning, and teachers support his growth. This includes approaches that cultivate strength of diverse identities, cultures, languages, and abilities of Kentucky's young people. And he would look for assessments that are relevant to student lives with real-world currency and relevance. So thank you, Ace, that one. You were in agreement with the Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education. And so just wanted to prompt just one more round of discussion here. Based on this little activity, why is it important that we encourage our local communities? The ones like Enrique, right? If he's sitting out there in Allen County as a student today, why should his community engage in co-creating accountability systems for this future? And that's as opposed to a traditional top-down structure. So the pressures the agency feels from the federal government, the pressures that districts feel from the state, why should we consider co-creation of these local systems?
I think that local systems bring an and, not an or. And that's how I feel about all this. You know, no matter what the students' goals, our current accountability system does ask for students to read and write and do math and science and social studies at a proficiency level that we want and will ensure all students have opportunities to succeed, even if their post-secondary plans change. To me, creating the and, a local system, allows you to further, and this goes back to the beginning of our conversation, rather further define the great things going on in your school system beyond a state test. Deborah?
And I also think it increases buy-in from all of your stakeholders too, as you let everyone have a part of that, reaching out into the community, you increase buy-in.
Thank you. I do have one more example, and I think it is important to walk through and experience this from Mira's perspective as well, because as I mentioned, these teams are inclusive by design. We aren't, while we recognize and obviously understand that the learners, the students are the primary user of our education systems, I think it's important to listen to every stakeholder's perspective and their experience. So this is an example of Mira, who is a community member. Perhaps she owns a local business, perhaps she has no children in the local system, but she does live in an urban city, about 2 million people, where the largest ethnic groups are Black and white, followed by Hispanic and multiracial. The main Englishes spoken in her community are English, Spanish, Arabic, Mandarin, and Cantonese. The median family income there is $50,000, with a large presence of manufacturing, publishing, and transportation industries. Her community has access to a large school district, many businesses, tech industry, youth development organizations, museums, parks, and cultural centers. And public transportation is widely available. And so when interviewed, and of course, now you know that this is actually a combination of community member interviews from across Kentucky. Mira said that we hear a lot from our employers that some of the kids that graduate, they have some good work skills, but they don't have good soft skills like being on time, polite, and respectful. Mira said that in junior achievement, we worked on 21st century skills with middle schools, and we taught them that hard skills will get you hired, but soft skills will get you fired. We would call out that soft skills right now would be getting you, which soft skills would be getting you fired, and it helped raise their level of awareness. Mira also said that you've got to be on time and part of a team. We talk about skills, but we don't always help them build them. My son hired on with a big employer, and having these skills led to him staying employed, while others hired at the same time dropped off. So after speaking with Mira, what does she need from our education system? Sounds like she is connected to a district. She plays a role in supporting as a community member, working in junior achievement and having a son who's recently graduated.
As a business owner who hires high school kids, we need people who can communicate, written communication, and able to speak to people, able to talk to people, able to guide people into choices, and also able to communicate as to, recently I got a text message from one young man that said, "My car is not working today." So, I mean, what does that mean to me? So I have to write back and say, your car is not working, period. Are you going to get a ride? Question mark. Are you going to ride your bike? Question mark. Are you asking for someone to come get you? Question mark. And then when he came back to work, I sat him down and said, how do I respond to this? And that happens constantly with new, highly rated students who still don't understand how to communicate.
Deborah?
Yeah, I think that it also seems like she needs a community group to belong to, where she could maybe be in some sort of a lead position with her community and share how she feels about that and the things that she has that maybe is working towards getting that word out and leading that with her community.
And I really like your next question about the desired future. Just why is it important for local communities like Mira's to co-create accountability systems? I think the key is to be able to listen to our community voices and really think about how we use those, and not just, I liked what you said earlier about, new understanding about what transparency really means.
Thank you. So just some things to think about. Of course, these are just two of our user profiles that were created by Kentuckians, and that you can find every stakeholder group from business owners, district administrators, teachers, students. You can find more of those profiles in the full United We Learn report that is linked on KDE's webpage, and we can make sure that you have access to that as well. But if you're interested in digging into those to find out what information helped shape that vision, the United We Learn vision, that is there for you to access. And again, this is just an example of what those L3 communities have been replicated in their own context. They went out, they collected this information to really focus on the needs of their community across stakeholder groups. And this is the information with that local context in mind. That's the information that informed those prototypes that were included in the video. So they dug deep in what's our challenge here, what's our problem as a community, and how are we going to attempt to solve that? And those prototypes are the result of those questions. And so just exciting work that's happening. If you all, as you think about the work that they're doing as a council, we encourage you to give them feedback, challenge them. We challenge our leads to think about ask the next hard question, right? And they have an important role to play in informing the future of assessment and accountability for our state.
Chuck, you have your hand raised?
Yes, I do. I was thinking, how can we communicate? How can we use our communities and the schools together? I think a really good possible way that we don't use a lot would be our chambers, since they're businesses, etc. Maybe we could educate or somehow network together with our chambers and our community to address some of these issues and see how we can do a better job by communicating to the students and expectations, as well as the students sharing with the chambers as well.
Mr. Fletcher, what you raise actually is something that Shelby County in their prototype is tackling, recognizing that we as a district understood a system, a robust system of competency-based education. But then when we asked these questions out in our community, there was still some hesitancy and some misunderstanding or a lack of understanding based on communication. And so they have successfully had a community-wide event over the summer, and they're continuing to think about a communication plan. How do we, and the chamber is just one big piece of that. I know that some of our L3s have chamber representation on their L3 communities, which we encourage as well, but absolutely, that's a great point to bring up.
And Sarah, I think your last slide is about participating in the, can chambers join this council?
Yes, so this is wide open. If any of the members of this council are interested in supporting the work that I've talked about today and supporting the vision, as I mentioned, you'll have in the application, there's a chance to be a part of the full council of about 60 Kentuckians, or you can dive deeply into one of the subcommittees. And there's an and there as well if you'd like to do both. So the subcommittees, you have the option on the application to kind of note which subcommittees you might be interested in. And please share this widely. This is open to grandparents. This is open to recent graduates. This is open to current students, to business owners, to chamber members. Please consider this opportunity for yourselves. But if you have someone that you think really would feel passionately about supporting this work, make sure that they have access to this application. There's a QR code here, as well as the link there at the bottom in a bit.ly link. And of course, you can access this if you were to Google KDE United We Learn. Our communications team has done a great job making sure that that is front and center as well. And apply by September 30th. So not a huge turnaround, but we just encourage you to spread the word, and we hope to have a really great council full of diverse perspectives to move this work forward.
Thank you, Sarah. It is a great opportunity, and the application's not that hard to fill out. So I hope you pass it along to some people in your community and have them participate. Is open to students if you have an aspiring high school student who you think would be a really great candidate. So any other questions for Sarah? Okay, well, we appreciate your time, Sarah. I know Melissa wanted to do some checking on some attendance. So Melissa, if you want to jump back in.
Thanks, Janet Beth. We had just a few members that either didn't catch on the first go round or popped in right after a roll call. So want to give them the opportunity to be on record. Deborah Atherton, if you'll just state that you're present. Deborah Atherton.
Yes, Deborah Atherton, Bullitt County Board, present.
Thank you. Martha Emmons.
Yes, McCracken County business owner, present.
Thank you. Leslie Jeffries.
Hi, Leslie Jeffries, present.
Lisa Keir.
Lisa Keir, Fayette County Public Schools, here.
And then Houston Barber, I've communicated with you, but wanted to give you the opportunity. And he may have popped off there, so. Okay, thanks, Jana Beth.
Thank you, Melissa. I want to remind everybody that our meeting dates have now been set. And so the future meeting dates are March 21st, July 18th, September 19th, and November 21st. And so when you get the updated minutes from this meeting, you'll see those dates. Please go ahead and reserve your calendar and make sure you block those times off. I will also say that our very next meeting is November 15th. And so we will have one more meeting in the 22 school year. And so the dates I gave you were for the 23 school year. Thank you all for hanging in there. You know, we were rolling along and I'd even give this committee a break. So I hope you have hung in there this morning. It is going to be a busy time for Kentuckians and educators in Kentucky while we roll out these new set of accountability results. And don't forget about the United We Learn Council to be a part of shaping the future of Kentucky and Kentucky students. So if anybody has, I would entertain a motion to adjourn at this time.
Make that motion.
A motion from Heather. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Jason and Deborah both raised to second. So we appreciate that. All in favor, raise your hand. And then wave goodbye. Thank you all so much. And we will see you in November.